All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're taking a close look at a single document, but it's a document that could fundamentally reshape the entire state structure in Pakistan.
And how do you even begin to reshape a country's entire power structure? Well, it often starts with something just like this, a single document. In this case, it's the proposed 27th Amendment to the Constitution. This bill, introduced back in November 2025, suggests some of the most massive changes to Pakistan's governance we've seen in a long time. So we're going to break it down and walk through the three biggest areas it touches: the courts, the military, and the executive branch.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about the courts. This is a big one. The amendment basically proposes splitting the highest level of the judiciary right down the middle.
It would create a brand new institution, right at the top of the judicial food chain, the Federal Constitutional Court. You can think of it as a super specialized court. Its whole job, according to this text, is to be the ultimate authority, the final word, on all things constitutional. And that's a job it would take over from the existing Supreme Court.
Now, this is where it gets really interesting because it directly impacts the powers of the existing Supreme Court. The proposal would get rid of Article 184 entirely. And that's a huge deal. Why? Because Article 184 is what gives the Supreme Court its suo motu powers. The power to step in and take up human rights cases all on its own, without anyone even filing a petition. Wiping that out, that is a massive shift in judicial power.
So what you end up with is this new division of labor. The new Federal Constitutional Court would handle all the big-picture constitutional stuff, interpreting the Constitution, settling fights between different levels of government, and ruling on fundamental rights. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court, well, it would become the final stop for most other types of cases, like criminal and civil appeals. Okay, so when you have two top courts like this, it begs a really important question. Who actually gets the final say?
And the proposed amendment is crystal clear on this. It says that any decision made by the new Federal Constitutional Court is binding on every single other court in Pakistan. And that includes the Supreme Court. So there's no ambiguity. It sets up a brand new, very clear hierarchy. All right, let's pivot to the second major area this amendment tackles. We're moving from the courts to the military, specifically the structure of its top leadership.
So a few key things are proposed here. First, it would abolish the office of the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Committee. Gone. In its place, the Chief of Army Staff's role gets a major upgrade. It expands to Chief of the Defense Forces. And then, and this is a big one, it would create a whole new category of lifetime ranks. Think Field Marshal, Marshal of the Air Force, and so on.
And we need to be clear, these are not just fancy ceremonial titles for retirement. No way. According to this text, these lifetime ranks come with some pretty unprecedented legal protections, effectively placing the people who hold them in a class of their own.
So what kind of protections are we talking about? Well, it's a 1-2 punch. First, anyone holding one of these ranks gets the same legal immunity as the president, for life. Second, trying to remove them from that rank, it would be nearly impossible. It would require a process similar to impeaching the president, the one that's laid out in Article 47. So, yeah, incredibly difficult.
And that brings us to the third big theme running through this whole proposal: beefing up the protections for the country's top political leaders.
Right now, a president has immunity from criminal proceedings while they're in office. But this amendment wants to take that protection and put it on steroids. The proposed change to Article 248 would make that immunity last not just for their term, but for their entire life.
And it isn't just about the president either. There's another change in here that, while smaller, still points in the same direction of strengthening the executive. It proposes bumping up the number of advisors the prime minister can appoint, from 5 up to 7.
Okay, so let's take a step back. We've looked at the judiciary, the military, and the executive. When you put all these different pieces together, what's the big picture? What does this proposed new structure actually look like?
Well, what we're really looking at is a fundamental redesign of the state's most powerful pillars. You have a new judicial hierarchy with a new court at the very top. You have a restructured military command with a more powerful chief and new, heavily protected lifetime ranks. And you have a stronger executive with lifetime immunity for the head of state.
And that really is the biggest takeaway here. These aren't just minor tweaks or small adjustments. This proposal is a potential rewriting of the core balance of power. If it were to pass, this single amendment would systemically change how power is divided, how it's used, and how it's kept in check throughout Pakistan's entire government.
So that leaves us with one final and really crucial question to think about. When you look at all these proposed shifts together, in the courts, in the military, and in the executive, how might an overhaul this massive truly redefine the balance of power in Pakistan?